Child abuse is a public health crisis in the United States. Every year, about 2/3 of a million different individual children are abused in some way. This is not 2/3 of a million instances of abuse. This is 2/3 of a million victims. There are far more instances. There are a number of risk factors that put a child at disproportionate risk of being abused. By far the largest one is economic vulnerability, partially because the children are most likely by far to be abused by someone that they know, and the demographics most likely to abuse a child are of lower economic standing for a variety of socioeconomic reasons, but also because poorer people, including poorer children, are much more vulnerable and therefore easier to abuse and exploit. What this means is that thanks to the economic damage wrought by the COVID-19 pandemic that has been felt in every country, or at least likely in every country, definitely in the United States, child abuse is getting significantly worse. According to data gathered from several developed countries, including the United States, rates of child abuse have increased by 1.2 to 1.4 times, which here stateside would be somewhere between about 134,000 to 270,000 more abused children per year. It's also getting harder to stop and to spot child abuse because both of the fact that it is harder to pursue resources for poorer people and for poorer children, especially for homeless people and homeless children, and because of the isolation necessitated by the quarantine that we had to do for the COVID-19 pandemic, it's much harder for family, friends, and distant relatives to observe household dynamics, but it's also much harder for social workers whose job it is to keep an eye on these things to really observe a family because they have to try to do it remotely. What this means is that prevention of child abuse is absolutely vital. It's likely to continue to rise, certainly, and it's much harder to spot and to stop, which means preventing it from happening in the first place becomes extremely important. The consensus on this front seems to be that education is extremely effective. There's an example of an American study on shaken baby syndrome. It's a head trauma resulting from being shaken as a baby that babies suffer, that found that about a third of the new mothers that were in this study, it differed depending on demographic, but I believe about a third were unaware. Yes, about a third were unaware of shaken baby syndrome at all, which means they did not know that shaking their baby would give them abusive head trauma. But upon receiving educational materials, those women who completed follow-up interviews had substantially improved knowledge of shaken baby syndrome, and this is corroborated by an Irish study that this American study cites, where over half of new parents were unaware of shaken baby syndrome, but also had a substantially improved knowledge upon receiving educational materials. There's also an El Salvadorian study into childhood sexual assault, which found that the majority of parents took it seriously, yes, but believed that a stranger was the most likely culprit. This obviously would constitute a huge challenge to actually preventing child abuse, akin perhaps to, say, a sheepdog that implicitly trusts wolves. A parent who implicitly trusts people known to the child, by far the largest threat to the child as a demographic, is going to be much worse at preventing child abuse. Now, as to my specific prescribed solution for this, the APSAC, the American Professional Society on the Abuse of Children, is the largest society in the United States for collating and distributing and utilizing educational materials about child abuse. They have a wealth of information available to people on their website that are about a variety of topics. Some are specific to COVID, how to look out for internet-related dangers now that children must be much more online because everything has become remote, or ways to mitigate stress for oneself and for one's children that result from the COVID pandemic, to more general information about all the detrimental effects of spanking your child. to information for law enforcement and for like academics in the field. It is an extremely valuable resource of a lot of very good information for educating oneself and for educating other people about child abuse. And thankfully, it's quite easy to help this nonprofit. They don't really take volunteers that I could find, I believe because they're an association of professionals. But they do accept donations, which, if you have the money, is a very easy and fast way of contributing to one of the largest organizations for gathering educational materials about child abuse and teaching people very important things about this topic. But also, if you just told one or two people about the gist of this speech or about this nonprofit and how important it is, just knowing about these materials can help you learn. It can help other people learn. It can help other people learn. Um, it makes it much more likely that someone might be inclined to check this out, maybe if they're having a kid and they want to make sure they're informed, and that can help to prevent a lot of child abuse down the line. So it's not a terribly difficult thing to contribute to helping with, even if you can just tell a couple of people. You could end up getting a couple more people more educated on a subject that a lot more people maybe should be a bit more educated on, which can go a long way to preventing child abuse in the future.